Can you guys hear me if I walk around? What Ryan has to say, he just timed in the back, and it's quite a bit less than 25 minutes, so there will be some time for questions at the end, for sure. But first of all, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate you coming out today. Fair warning, I'm going to pace around a lot because I'm fidgety like that, so don't be scared. Just tell me if you can't hear me. I want to thank Poppy and the whole organizing team for putting this together this week. I know it was a lot of work, and we all appreciate everything that went into that. So, as she said, my name's Ryan. I'm the owner and art director at 2nd Street Creative, which is a tiny Indianapolis-based branding boutique. But I'm not at all going to talk about design today. So, at least not design in the sense of Adobe Creative Suite. We're going to get a little more squishy. Today, we're going to talk about tension and the concept of tension. Sometimes tension can have a negative connotation with people, but there is nothing inherently negative about tension because tension exists everywhere, inside everything, including inside your own head, according to science. And because it's perfectly normal and it's everywhere, it's important that you get comfortable with tension. And here's a secret. Balance as a state of equilibrium is a false promise, a lie that's been sold to you to get you to buy mediocre ebooks from people that don't really know what they're doing. So I want you to really think through that through that lens as we kind of talk through this today. They're trying to get you to think in a binary fashion, that you are here, but you need to be there. But the thing is, here and there are not mutually exclusive. We all exist on a continuum, fluid, somewhere in between. In fact, two things can be true at the same time, and often are, because I said, like, the way we exist is on this continuum, not on either end of the spectrum. For example, it can be true that I was generally prepared for this presentation today. It can also be true that I completely changed it last week, wrote a lot of it last night, and finished the slides in that chair over there this morning. So, being prepared and procrastinating are not mutually exclusive. I exist in between, just a little more that way usually. So that was a light example, but this is a serious concept because you have to give yourself some grace to move along the continuum. As we established, life is fluid, it's not binary. So accepting this reality can be a really, really liberating experience for people, especially for creatives. It pushes us to understand that tension spurs us to grow. It spurs us to improve. We can regress, we can improve again. Understanding the fluidity of it gives us the grace to do this. We're going to be going through a few examples today. These are some specific examples of tension that have informed the way that I live my life or do a shitty job of living my life. So we're going to talk about art and business, planning and procrastinating, self-worth and affirmation, and maybe some other stuff if I need to spread some time out. So design is a perfect example because design lives somewhere right in between art and business. It's just the right amount of compromising your artistic integrity to have something to eat. How many just like straight up graphic, ooh, that was a solid laugh. Were you sitting down here earlier? Someone was getting really good laughs down here. How many of you guys are like graphic designers or in branding? Just curious. Okay. What about like UI, UX stuff? Okay. So even a little bit heavier on that. So same idea though. Like I said, just an appropriate amount of compromising your integrity. Another manifestation of this tension is doing work for public good versus taking that corporate paycheck. But what happens when both of these things are true? What happens when one feeds the other? Corporate tech startups are not really my favorite projects, but they do pay, and they do pay well sometimes. So I knock out one or two of these each year so that I can turn around and pull together some of the most talented designers in town and do a comprehensive identity system for an IPS school for free. Or Graham and I can work together on helping the Cultural Trail with a fundraising campaign for all their public art installations for pennies, essentially, or no pennies in some cases. But you can see how that tension between Doing things for public good and doing things that pay you exist. We are not any one thing or the other. We exist in between. The next one that I want to talk about, and as I identified earlier, this tension is quite real to me. Being informed and educated and prepared versus the reality of being reactionary, impulsive, a procrastinator. Waiting until the last minute can certainly be a problem, but so can overeducating yourself and not getting anything done. That can be equally as much of a disservice to your progress as procrastinating can. And as we established earlier, there's a lot of resources out there centered around helping you, get your workflow in order and optimizing or whatever the hell you need to, but you need to be careful about people selling you stuff. You cannot become incapacitated by the process of getting to work. Like, eventually you're going to have to just do the work. I'm about to fall off this stage, so someone warn me if I get close. The third kind of pillar that I want to talk about, and the most important one that I think here, is the concept of self-worth and external affirmation. So this tension is all about value and where we derive value from. Is it coming from something internal, an intrinsic sense of self-worth, or is it coming from external sources of affirmation? Again, both of these things are probably true at the same time. But in this particular case, one is much more healthy than the other. But we need to recognize that both exist. Further, how can we have healthier metrics of success? I try to measure my success in the stage of life I'm at based on the success of those people around me. That's an important marker of how successful I feel like I'm being. And also, to me, success is not monetary or accolades or Instagram followers or any of that shit. Success to me is time. Time to do what I want to do and time to be with the people I want to be with. So we need to also discuss the internet's effect on this particular tension, because I think that's a big part of this. The internet causes us to constantly measure our value based on comparing our work to that of our peers. But one thing as creatives that we all need to understand is we are more than the work that we deliver. A messy, really complicated sense of identity is essential for us to understand and to be healthier creatives. We are more than our work. In addition to running the design shop, I lead a little thing called Creative Mornings. It's a free breakfast lecture series I put on with a few hundred of my friends every month. And it's beautiful. How many of you guys have been to a Creative Mornings before? Oh, that's good. I expect to see you next Friday. It's free. It's like I said, it's beautiful, and it helps me have a more complicated sense of my role in the community. Because I don't want to be known when I walk into the room as someone that makes things look pretty, right? I want to be thought of as a facilitator of stories, a connective force in this city. So my best chance to leave the world a better place than I found it is not making logos. It's probably activating the energy in that room every month. And it's certainly supporting these three incredible women that I share a home with. All right, grab bag. This one is pretty self-explanatory, so we're going to go rapid fire style in here with some stuff that didn't fit into any of the categories that I had established, but I really wanted to say, and I have the mic, so I'm going to say it. Put your phone down. The next time that you guys are in line somewhere, I want you to look. And I am as guilty of this as anyone. But again, I think it's important for us to be aware of these things. It's almost reflexive at this point. Anytime that you are still for more than 10 seconds, just watch people grab for their phones. This is a problem, especially as creative people, because this idle time is where our minds are supposed to wander. It's where we're supposed to not think in a linear fashion. It's where the best ideas are supposed to come from. So instead of being still and having idle time and letting your mind wander, we're consuming meaningless, inconsequential social media streams. And it's not doing anything for us other than us consuming information, not producing anything. So the next time you're in line and you feel that itch to reach for your phone, I want you to think about this. And I want you to think about how I almost fell off the stage trying to tell you this. But just keep your phone in your pocket and see what that feels like next time. Okay, listen to understand, not to respond. This one's also pretty simple and straightforward, but sometimes you need to make an effort to just shut up and listen. You might hear some things that you didn't expect. And I guarantee that you'll become a more empathetic person as you're listening to someone to try to understand what they're saying to you instead of already thinking how you're going to respond to what they're telling you. So I want you guys to work on that as well. Next one here is the arrogance of the new idea. So our culture is constantly pushing the idea that you need to be the founder, the CEO, the star, the YouTube channel person, the idea person. But sometimes a problem has enough ideas around it. It has enough leadership. And what would benefit that problem the most is not another idea person, but a soldier. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to sit in the back of the room and listen. Stop being so arrogant as to assume that our newfangled ideas can solve some age-old problem. Be a soldier sometimes, not always an idea person. Letting things die. This is a tough one for me, for sure. I tend to retain things and hold on to them until they've, every ounce of life is squeezed out of it. But as creative folks, we're never going to have any space for new things if, again, we're constantly holding on to ghosts or ideas of things that weren't meant to be. And we're terrible at this, myself included. But we're doing more harm than good if we're clinging to things that aren't working. You are enough. This one is pretty simple as well and kind of relates back to some of the internet discussion that we were having earlier. We all, as creative professionals or designers of one type or another, suffer from constantly comparing ourselves to others. And I think Josh, at the very beginning of the morning, mentioned, the idea of this constant comparison. The envy is the thief of joy. And there are definitely times where I find myself, especially as a younger designer, looking at other work and, again, being maybe over-educated or over-inspired by what other people are doing. And I think it's important that this really relates back to understanding that, like, you're enough. Like, you are you, and the experience and perspective that you deliver is what makes you unique. And that will help you develop a more intrinsic sense of self-worth, which is a lot healthier than looking for that external affirmation. Be subversive. All of us exist or work in an institution of one type or another, and I think it is incredibly important for us to understand that these institutions are always committed first to their own survival and not to progress. So to those of us that are working in these institutions and trying to bend these institutions, we need to be double agents. Like, we have a responsibility, if we're going to be inside them, to bend them. And when you find yourself too compromised and not able to be subversive, you need to get the fuck out of there too. So I think that is a responsibility of ours. Okay, we're going to get toward the end here. I told you I was moving quick. I did start 5 minutes early, by the way. Tell Poppy that. So in closing, when things get uncomfortable, I think it is important that you guys remember to embrace the tension, to understand that is a natural part of living, of being a creative person, that we are not any one thing or the other, but we exist somewhere in between, and we're moving along that continuum all the time. That seemingly divergent things do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can be two things at once, and you should be two things at once, and maybe more than two things. So there's no equilibrium as a state of constancy in the work that we do. There's no such thing as work-life balance. Be skeptical of all of this stuff that is trying to sell you some solution to that. Get comfortable in this state of tension. Embrace a complicated sense of identity. And go forth, do good work, and it's important that you leave this place better than you found it. So that's all I got today. So I'd be interested in taking some questions if you guys have any questions about any of the work that I do or how this kind of manifests itself in my life. So I think that's all right. Anybody got any questions? Yes.
So you mentioned no work-life balance. How do you do a good job of balancing a private family, everything else that you do, and work?
Oh man, I don't. I think that I try not to get comfortable, like I think the times that we get complacent are when we have it all figured out. one beautiful thing about having young children is they don't really give a shit what you did yesterday or what you're stressed out about tomorrow. So surrounding yourselves with people that have an approach like that, because there are some adults that are blessed enough to think that way too, but that idea of of living in the moment certainly helps. I go through seasons of life, to be totally honest. Like, there are some times where I feel like I'm better at it than others, and there are times where, you know, I feel really guilty about creative mornings and work stacking up and volunteer things, and I go a few days without kind of connecting to the things that are most important to me. So I think being aware of that is probably the most important thing, for sure. Yeah.
How would you describe that tipping point between being comfortable with tension and living in it and knowing when to let things die?
Oh, that's really good. I think that sometimes it really requires external perspective, that we get inside our heads so much, and also all entrepreneurs are guilty of this. Call it the curse of context, right? You understand everything around you, and sometimes surrounding yourselves with people who don't know all the details or know all the administrative things that need to be done, they can have a healthier view from the 30,000 foot level to challenge you to make a better decision. You know, I think being intentional about trajectory is really important too. That the hardest thing for me to do, running a business and a nonprofit and helping, you know, steer a family, is thinking about the broader sort of trajectory part of it and zooming out enough. And sometimes that takes getting away from it and being with someone that, like I said, is going to challenge you to think about it that way. It's a good question, for sure. Yeah.
So tension being just a normal part of life and us, you know, being everywhere, how does that affect, or does it affect your design, you know, whether in your business or on your good morning, creative morning?
It's a good morning. If I'm being real about it, I think that one way that manifests itself is I have a lot of tension around making a project an 8 versus a 10, right? That sometimes it is unhealthy to push a project out that doesn't need to be a 10 and make it a 10 every time, because that's impossible. Like, there's a finite amount of emotional energy, of time to do things, and not everything warrants 110% of my mental energy. But then the tension comes from, if there are 3 or 4 8s in a row, as an artist who doesn't want to compromise his integrity every project, I have to pump out a 10 every once in a while to just feel good about it, right? So I do think that tension manifests itself in the work. Certainly, I have a problem with saying yes to everything. I think I'm always going to have that problem. There's tension in that. I don't see a brighter future for me in doing that, because I have a tough time. Like, who the hell am I to say, like, I'm not doing this project for you? You know? I make fucking designs for, like, I pick out colors, right? Like, I'm a plumber with a sketchbook. Like, there's no difference. Like, what I do is a trade. And I don't even view that as the most important work that I do. Like, I'm good at it, but really that's an excuse for me to get across the table from someone and tell their story. So there is a lot of tension in what I need as a human from what I do professionally versus what that's going to pay me, right? Like, I always joke around with my friends, like, my ebook is going to be how to be what do I call it? Moderately successful and stay there. Like, that's my move. 10 years in, moderately successful and stay there. So there is tension. Like, sometimes I want to grow and sometimes I don't want to grow. But really, I don't want to grow. But I do feel that tension sometimes in the way the work presents itself. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. I think that's it. Thank y'all.